Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Oh my goodness.
stretching?
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like,
Time
feels good.
Yeah,
Get a
time
little
to
bit
do
of
the
it.
podcast.
It's Friday.
I feel like you're just waking up and get going.
I
over here.
really kind of feel like I am as well.
Yeah?
But that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, glad
Yeah.
you're here.
I'm looking forward to a great weekend. Got a lot of yard projects. I mean, I know that no one out there in listener land is probably interested in the stuff that I'm doing outside, but I'm pretty darn, the work that we've done to create some really cool outdoor living spaces, because we honestly would spend half our day
It's one of the beautiful
outside
things
if we
about
could.
Utah.
Yeah.
That I personally love the dry
Mhm.
air, and so being able to be outside on a cool morning is just
Oh,
fantastic.
absolutely.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
and
we do enjoy the outdoor space.
Anna Marie Beck, thank
Anna Marie
you.
Beck, yeah, shout out. She sent us some nice, fun mugs a while back, so that's
Yeah.
great.
Yep. Okay.
Announcements?
Announcements.
Yep, we got next Wednesday, the 16th. We're going to do a White Hat portfolio summary report. That thing, we're going to revisit that and kind of give updates on that. We got emails this morning on some of that from some of the providers.
Yeah. So you remember, everybody, it's the report that you can pull so that beginning of the month, every dealer should have it on their desk.
Right, to be able to reconcile principle across their operations.
And
so we're pleased to be able to say that some of the providers are working. Many of them are, and we just been in contact with some of them recently, and so it looks like we got.
It's not something that it's like moving. The difference between moving a speedboat and moving the Titanic is some just take longer because there's other things on their roadmap or whatever. But there's a lot of wheels in play, and it's really been awesome to see the response and to watch that. And Jim's been in enough DMSs to know that you can't get to this in any of them.
And I also
in this
understand
way.
what the challenge is, why that's difficult. But as we talked about, it's been a part of a conversation with our V8 dealers and some of our clients around this, because they're all working to try to get their numbers reconciled to some reasonable deviation and get them turned in. So that's part of what we're
making progress. That's awesome.
It's been good. And then the following Friday of next week, we're going to cover the thing about turning outsourced repairs faster. Everybody's fighting the challenge about getting cars reconditioned. A lot of dealers say the only way they can the only barrier to more sales is getting them through recon. So we're going to offer some very concrete tips about how to use outsourced repairs and get some
to be able
to
get that done faster. So
it might
awesome.
be the difference in boosting sales.
Yeah.
So other than that, I think we got to announce our.
We have a special guest, and I'm going to bring him in. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Michelle and Jim.
We really love having Jeff come and visit with us. First off, he's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed having one of the most positive people that I've been around,
and also one of the busiest people.
We were just talking before the show started about what Jeff's schedule has been like, and you're just always going, and that's probably part of the job description.
It is, yeah, and I enjoy it. We were talking earlier before I hopped on here. For me, it's such a unique opportunity to get a chance to go spend time with dealers that I don't always get a chance to spend time with. And I'll tell you, every time, whether I go to a 20 group meeting or I go to a state convention, or we go to one of our events, I learn something every single time, just kind of sitting down and visiting with the dealers. And I think that's part of our responsibility as an association, is to know what it is that they're going through, to kind of, I always say, celebrate their victories and feel their pains. I mean, if we're going to represent their interest, we have to better understand what they're going through.
Yeah. Right. And so for those that are listening, we get a lot of listeners that aren't part of what we call the Golden 500, the 500 people that almost always show up to conferences. So Jeff is the CEO of the national organization, so NIADA. And so, Jeff, you came from Texas as their executive director, and then you moved to NIADA. Love that decision.
We did the math 17 months ago.
18 months actually now.
Right.
So it's been a year and a half. What a ride.
It has been. It's awesome. I mean, obviously, you guys know, loved my time there in Texas and the dealers in Texas. I always say they kind of took a chance, on a 36-year-old kid that had been working at a teachers association and knew absolutely nothing about the automobile industry. And some would argue I still know very little about the automobile industry.
Do you have
Same.
to run an association? Do you really have to?
Well, you have to know a lot about associations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's all good. We got,
Word.
just was looking forward to getting a recap about the policy conference that happened in September in DC. We know that, and just, we've talked about that before. We've had you on the broadcast to talk about it last year. And so for those who might be listening who aren't even aware of what the policy conference is about, I mean, I think my quick explanation was that it's an opportunity for dealers and people from the association and lobbyists from the used car industry to be able to sit with lawmakers in Washington, D.C. and talk about whatever the issues are at hand for dealers. So you just came off of that event. We've talked to a number of dealers that were there. So it must have been a successful event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll touch on that real quick, Jim, if you don't mind. I do want to mention though, real quick, just to, on behalf of the association and all of our dealers out there, I just want to mention that our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to all of the dealers that are affected out, on the Southeast in Florida and all the way up to North and South Carolina. Certainly just know that we're thinking about you. I will tell you that our foundation has had conversations about how we can help those dealers who are in that situation. So anyway, just wanted to mention that real quick.
Thank you.
And we've talked to dealers that are helping dealers. Like I talked to somebody yesterday, Jeff, and you probably know them, but they're in Texas and they expect to have 5 trailer loads go to North Carolina on Wednesday.
And wanted to know dealers there that we could connect them with so that they could have a place. Right.
So it's fantastic. And I shared the link just before we started the broadcast of the post that went out about the foundation. And any opportunity for dealers to help dealers and for dealers to help the foundation, then we definitely want to support that effort because we've spoke to dealers, in our VA meeting last night that they're in Central Florida and we're, power outages and all these kind of things. Right. So a lot of people directly affected for sure. So our hearts go out as well.
Yeah. Very, very, very good. So let's talk about policy conference. So, kind of to answer your question, Jim, and I say this all the time, one of the responsibilities that we have as an association, and I really think it's our primary responsibility, is to grow the influence of the association, right? Make sure that we have relationships, that we're talking to the appropriate people so that when an issue comes up or when a situation comes up, the policymakers, as you had mentioned, the lawmakers, they want to make sure that they get input from the association, and that's primarily our response.
I love that you even have that communication track, and I've been really impressed with how much has been fostered in that in the last few years. So,
and so I think when it comes to Washington D.C., there's at least 2 sides to this, and there's probably many more than 2 sides. But you have your actual elected officials, right? And so you want to go out there representing the constituents in their district, and we want to make sure that we're putting the constituents in front of them, that they understand. A lot of what we're doing is kind of education about the used car industry. When there's a particular bill or a particular idea that's being floated around, we want to make sure that we're in a position to help educate those legislators. And a big part of that is making sure that you have a relationship with them. So part of the policy conference is going out and talking about issues, but a big part of the policy conference is going out and building relationships. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. And then once a piece of legislation passes, a lot of times then it goes to the federal agencies, right? And so I think it's important, and some may even argue more important, to have those relationships as well. So for us, primarily it's the FTC and the CFPB, and we need to make sure that we're out there, again, educating them on our industry, educating them on the service that we provide. Jim, I've seen you've done a lot of writing about, and you guys talk about the white hat way. Sometimes when you get over in that regulatory side, you kind of always end up dealing with dealers who might have some issues. And sometimes I think my view is skewed because I usually deal with the best of the best. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And so we've got to make sure that we have a relationship with the lawmakers. And then we also need to make sure that we have a relationship with the policymakers. And I've actually, in this particular, with the policy conference, I've been very, very fortunate. I kind of inherited a really good foundation that Steve Jordan and Sean Peterson had built this, years ago. I think it was probably back in 2000 and maybe 13 or 14 was the first policy conference that we had, maybe even before that. And
Mhm.
so our responsibility as an association is to take the good foundation that they put in place and to continue to build on that.
Very nice.
So to me, that's really what the policy conference is about. And also I'll say just sharing ideas with the states. You know, one of the things that we did in our legislative committee this year is, as opposed to going to the legislative committee and talking about what's going on at the federal level, we talked about some really positive laws that had been passed from the good work that was done in Mississippi, in Texas, in Virginia. And there were some other states that are going to pick that ball up and run with it and see if they can pass similar legislation in their states that would be advantageous, not just to the dealers, but also advantageous to the consumers.
Right.
Awesome. And so does this something, some of these, we've witnessed some of the different legislations that have gone on that have been passed in different states that are benefit the dealers in those states by having those kind of conversations. And this is what's happening. Do you think it really helps just the national, on the national level? Because some of those things that have been passed in states, couldn't they be passed on a national level?
The vast majority of the rules and regulations that are going to affect you as an automobile dealer are going to be passed at the state level.
Okay, good to know.
So I mean, obviously, the FTC has become much more aggressive in their regulation of the industry, much more than we've seen probably in the last 15 years. So I think that's probably a good argument, Michelle. We're seeing more and more, and certainly once the CFPB came into place with our buy here, pay here dealers, they started seeing more regulation in that area. But I would still say to this day, when it comes to insurance, when it comes to licensing, when it comes to your DMV, the state is still the place where you're going to see the majority of the regulation that's going to kind of affect you on a day-to-day basis. And then obviously, that's where the attorney generals all live in the state association in the states as well.
I recognize certainly in your role at the independent auto dealers, your constituents include both independent retail dealers and that'll be and also some buy here, pay here folks. And of course, we're on the buy here, pay here morning show. So when I think about the CFPB, one of the things that I would do if I had 5 minutes with those folks, I would just say, just make sure as you do your daily job, recognize the losses and the risk that these folks in buy here, pay here
every
take.
Day.
We talk a lot about what they charge consumers, and yes, they're unscrupulous dealers. You're going to find them. Of course, they're out there. I just think it's important to also recognize that these dealers are in a segment where they're, and it's front of mind for me, Jeff, because we just happened to see something yesterday where a car comes back in awful condition. It's like the risk that these folks take is just, it's not seen as much. And so I think that's what we would say. Let's just be mindful of that as we legislate, so this is part of where we be coming from, I think, and thinking that way and trying to,
Yeah. You were going to talk about, go ahead.
Well, and so I'll touch on that for just a second, because one of the things that we did at this year's policy conference, previously we would have the CFPB and the FTC come to our group and address our group. And I think that was unbelievably valuable as we started building that relationship. And you see now, we have the FTC and the CFPB and the IRS. They're at our convention constantly. I think having that relationship is invaluable.
Sure.
This year, we did something a little bit different. We took about 10 dealers to the CFPB and to the FTC. And we sat down with their actual policymakers. We sat down with their attorneys. And Jim, I'll tell you that this is, we showed them a deal jacket. We talked to them about the amount of paperwork. We talked to them about some of the rules that they are implementing. We talked to them about some of the litigation that they're in. And I think sometimes when you're in that position, I mentioned earlier, that you start to believe that all car dealers are kind of built that way. The primary message that we had for the FTC and the CFPB is like, we kind of want the same thing, right? Like, we want the consumer to be successful.
Sure.
Like, the regulator wants to protect the consumer. We want the consumer to come back and buy more vehicles for us. So at the end of the day, if we can sit down and talk about how and look, the consumer wants to be successful. Right. So it seems like, and this is we spend a lot of time in Texas having these conversations with the OCCC and with the DMV, and like, how can we get to a place where you can do your job as a regulator? Because we think that's important, right? You have to have regulations out there. You're going to have to create an even playing field for kind of some of those potentially unscrupulous dealers that you were talking about, Jim. But recognize and understand the risk that we're taking. I know many of your listeners are buy here, pay here dealers. And the buy here, pay here dealer, the message that we shared with the FTC is, if we're not lending or loaning money to those individuals, where do they go? I mean, they've already gone to the traditional lines of,
And they
of
can't get
credit.
That's right.
And they weren't able to get financing there.
Sure.
And so I think to your point, Jim, if you can appreciate the risk that the dealer is taking, but then also if we kind of start from the point that we kind of want the same thing, right? We want the consumer to be successful. And if we start from there, I think that sometimes when it comes to writing those rules, it makes it a little bit easier and it doesn't feel like it's as confrontational. So
Exactly.
we spent about a little over an hour and a half with the CFPB and the FTC. It was just a very casual sit down across the table and visit with each other. Tell us what you're feeling. Tell us what you're seeing. I say all the time, you'll hear big numbers, like, well, we had 100,000 complaints. Well, 100,000 of just about anything is a lot. But what we ask the FTC is if they have any statistics on how many total transactions happen in the automotive space a year. And if you look at the total number of transactions, and I'm not talking about just purchasing a car, I'm talking about servicing a car, I'm talking about taking a payment, like total transactions, it's
a drop.
100,000. And I'm not saying that they said it was 100,000, but that's where we really started those conversations. I know in Texas is let's look at that number compared to the total number of transactions. And you know what? Maybe we end up patting ourselves on the back and saying we're doing a pretty dang good job, for the total number of transactions. And so anyway, those are conversations that I just think are invaluable to have with the federal agencies and the state agencies for that matter too.
Good.
Yeah. I love it.
It's like the thing about, just we're actually sitting on the same side of the table.
Oh,
we're reviewing the same thing. Right. So
and I love that you're bringing math because you can't like it's math is math. And so you want to compare, like, this is how many complaints. Well, this is how many transactions. And so, and it's not just about the feels and the emotion or the whatever, it's about the math. And I love that, we teach all the time with White Hat Way. It's the customer success. You're sitting on the same side of the table. Let's set them up for success, do what we can, but we still recognize that a dealer is going to make a living and they need to make a living and they can't,
capitalistic market. No one begrudges that at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we should probably move on to talk about the dealer forum, shall we?
Or was there anything else you wanted to talk about with the policy conference?
The one thing I will say, we had a reception on Monday night. We had over 17 congressmen there. We had over 100 dealers and industry partners and state executives, and it was a good full packed room. It looked fantastic. We went to Capitol Hill. We talked to. We had over 100 meetings scheduled with legislators or their staff members. We talked about a number of issues. One of the issues that we talked about is the Redo Act, which is tied up with this vehicle shopping rule or the CARS rule. And you guys know that the oral arguments just started on that. This thing's kind of tied up in the courts, but there's also a piece of legislation out there. So the one thing I'll mention about that is we got back home after the visits, and Congressman Guest from Mississippi is one of the visits that a group of dealers went to. And so 2 days after our visit, the congressman sent a letter to the state executive director in Mississippi and told her that he was signing on to the Redo Act as a co-sponsor. And so
wonderful.
It's when you go and you do something like that, and look, we have businessmen and women here, and when they make their mind up to do something, they want it done yesterday, right? And Congress just doesn't move that way. And so sometimes it can be frustrating when you go to Capitol Hill and you're like, golly, we just spent a whole day down there talking with everybody about these different pieces of legislation. Like, what happened? And as you guys know, at this point, they're all at home kind of running their reelection campaign, and they're not going to come back probably until January. So getting those small victories when you have a congressman say, I heard you, I was listening, I didn't make the decision that day, but 2 or 3 days later, they follow up. Diane Perry is the executive director in Mississippi. She's doing a fantastic job out there to have that congressman call and say, I'm in, I'm going to sign in on the bill. I think you guys are right. Those are small victories that we have to celebrate, because you get enough of those small victories, and eventually you're gonna have some positive legislation come out.
And
so anyway,
if you have someone like that has like, I'm on board, they're gonna talk to others. And that's good.
Great. That's quick action.
Awesome. Yep. Okay, so
there was you had a couple other
anything else from the policy conference?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about catalytic converter theft for quite some time. We're going to continue to talk about that. That bill's been around for a while. It's a little frustrating because it's a bipartisan bill. We haven't been able to get that one over the finish line. Lots of support behind that bill. I like to share a funny story about that particular piece of legislation. When it was originally introduced, it was introduced by Senator Amy Klobuchar, which most people know. Senator Amy Klobuchar, ran for on the Democratic side anyway, in the primary, ran for the nomination of her party. So the first co-sponsor of that bipartisan piece of legislation was
Her.
J.D. Vance.
Oh, wow.
So Amy Klobuchar and J.D. Vance were the original co-sponsors or sponsors of the catalytic converter bill. Now, it's kind of frustrating that hasn't passed yet. That would essentially create a blueprint for states to be able to adopt. It does a lot of different things in that original bill. We anticipate that we'll see another one coming up in 2025, and certainly we'll be behind that and supporting that. We had talked a little bit about the REDO Act. The REDO Act would essentially take down the vehicle shopping rule or the cars rule and have the FTC do a little bit more studying before they implement that rule. That's essentially what the REDO Act would do, among other things. And then the Right to Repair Act, that one is another piece of legislation that kind of gives consumers access to information to help them for diagnostics on their car and things of that nature. And we supported that piece of legislation as well. So anyway, it was very exciting. And our members, I say all the time, like, the association can go have that conversation all day long. And legislators know that we're hired to go have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
But when a dealer takes time away from his or her dealership, when an industry partner of ours takes time away to go have that conversation, it's just more impactful.
Yeah.
And I do, real quick, if you guys don't mind, I do want to thank the sponsors, because we would not have an opportunity to this event wouldn't happen if it weren't for the sponsors. It's an expensive event to put on for an association. And I'll just go through them real quick. But Pastime GPS, Buckeye, Empire, Cox Automotive, Advantage, All Data, Auction Access, and Dealer Center. Can't thank them enough for their sponsorship and help us make sure that we can get the dealers there and get them in front of those legislators.
I heard Pastime in there.
I know, and they're one of our sponsors for White Hat Way, our founding sponsors.
They're awesome.
They really are. I really appreciate all of those that I've gotten to know. Just one funny thing, kind of catalytic converters.
Oh yeah.
So have you watched Tulsa King?
I do not. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's TV.
It's not regular prime time, but I think it's Netflix or something.
I'm not sure.
But it's called Tulsa King, and it has Sylvester Stallone in it, and he's a gangster mobster that goes to Tulsa. And there was a big scene in season 2 about them going in and cutting all the catalytic converters out of underneath the car.
And we're sitting there watching.
And we're going don't show people.
Yeah, this is a real thing.
I'm gonna share with you a little bit of an indictment of our society. I was in Philadelphia the other day, and there's 2 statues that are across the street from each other. And one of them is Rocky. Sylvester Stallone, a larger than life. A lot of people have seen it, where he ran up the stairs. And so you've got the giant Rocky statue. On the other side of the street, there's a statue of George Washington on a horse. There was a line of at least, no exaggeration, 85 to 120 people in line to take pictures of a statue of Rocky. A movie character. There was not one person taking a picture of George Washington on his horse.
Wow.
And I told my wife,
Mom.
That's all you have to know about our society right now. We've got 100 people that want to take a picture of a statue of a movie character.
Yeah.
And we've got not one person even looking at the Washington statue.
Oh my goodness.
In fairness, George Washington was around before he had a chance to have a social media following.
That's
so he didn't
true.
have a Facebook page.
That's true.
That's good point.
So let's move on to the dealer.
Yeah, the Dealer Forum. That's a really fun thing coming up. And I think the dates are November 10 through 12 in New Orleans. Is that right?
Correct. Good. Yeah. November 10th through 12th in New Orleans. It's going to be at the JW Marriott. Very excited about it. And, we talked a little bit about this last year. It's really a unique and different education format than what you normally see. So many of the national events, and there's a lot of great ones out there, but so many of the national education events, they're kind of the 45-minute sit and get. You've got a presenter up there. They'll have panel discussions from time to time, but it's really more about like a presenter that is up there talking at you. This event is very, very different. It's kind of meant to be a sharing of ideas. It's meant to be much more inclusive. If for you to get the most out of the Buy Here, Pay Here Dealer Forum, you really need to come with the mentality that you're going to participate. This year, we've actually added 3 what we're calling workshops. They're 3-hour workshops. One is developing a business plan. One is focusing on collections and underwriting. And then there's one that is focusing on kind of building your brand and kind of your sales pipeline. They're 3-hour workshops. They'll have booklets that are included where you're kind of filling in your information along the way, or you're filling in the information that you're getting. But the idea behind it is that the presenter is really going to encourage the audience to participate. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to, when we send out the confirmation emails, we're going to encourage people to bring your laptop, bring your numbers, be prepared to sit down and kind of talk about a lot of what you guys do, very similar to what you guys do in the events that you all have. So that's how we're going to kick things off on Sunday evening. And then on Tuesday morning, we have some of the 45-minute presentations, what we call, the breakout sessions. All of those except for one are going to be led by dealers. They're going to be either panel discussions or it's going to be a dealer putting the presentation on. And again, the thought being it's going to be more collaborative. It's going to be a lot more about kind of sharing ideas. Very, very unique. And, we did something similar to this in Texas and it was really successful. And then on Monday afternoon, that's really the hallmark of the event. When you register for the event, we ask you to give us some information about your dealership, how big the dealership is, how many employees you have, how long you've been in business, where you're located. And we take that information and we put you in a group. And so you'll be in what we call dealer roundtables. The last year, I think our smallest roundtable was 14 and our largest roundtable had 22. And then each group has an agenda and it's led by a dealer moderator. And the dealer walks through the agenda. They go around the room, give people an opportunity to share ideas about what they're doing at their dealership, talk about things that have worked, talk about things that didn't work. And we've got really an all-star lineup of the quality of the dealer that we have attending and that are going to be presenting is probably what I'm maybe most excited about. I mean, I think you guys have had Chad Randash and Rhonda Cavender, Tyler Simmons, who I know is someone that you guys have had on the show. Tyler and his family, they do a fantastic job. Blake Ingram's going to be out there, Jennifer Harlow, Russell Moore, Jeff Watson, Rich Bernard, Alan Lindsay, Ben Libby. It's kind of a who's who of the Buy Here, Pay Here industry that are going to be out there sharing ideas. And so obviously something that we're very excited about. And I think what we're most excited about is that it's just very, very unique.
And it is not an independent, it's a Buy Here, Pay Here event, correct?
Yeah, it really is focused. It is focused on Buy Here, Pay Here. I mean, it originated from the NABD event. So this is back when NIADA, the previous administration really brought NABD into the fold. And so, Ken Shilson and Ingram Walters did a fantastic job with really helping to educate and focus on Buy Here, Pay Here. This was probably back in 2006 or maybe even before 2006. And then I don't know exactly what the date was, but I'm going to say it was probably around 2018, 19. Steve Jordan and Sean Peterson and the administration that was in place then at NIADA was really focused on growing the tent and bringing people into the association. And so it came from NABD. So to your point, Michelle, it is still focused on Buy Here, Pay Here. We're going to talk a lot about collections and underwriting and, customer retention, the things that you really do focus on. We always say we want to collect the cash, not the car. And that's kind of our focus here.
Yeah,
that's good.
Isn't that a tagline of Brent Carmichael's?
Heard that with Brent Carmichael.
He's done a lot of presentations all over the country.
I asked before we started.
Actually, that's the only reason that we're interested in bringing Brent on board is because of his taglines.
Right, of course.
So we're going to get to inherit all of Brent's taglines.
And now you get to freely use and throw them around all you want.
Right. Beyond that, he's just a troublemaker all day long.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah. No, we obviously have a ton of respect for Brent, and he's still unscheduled to join the association January. I asked before we started, is there a chance he's going to get there sooner? But it sounds like you're still unscheduled for January 1.
He's knowing Brent, he's got a lot of irons to put away, or to a lot of irons in the fire just through NCM.
Well, and I'll just mention, it's been great working with NCM. Paul Lips has been fantastic. And but part of the conversation that we had with Brent and with NCM is, we have a number of members of our association, and then certainly people that were part of the NCM program that are going to be coming over to NIADA, a number of dealers. I think there are 4 different buy here, pay here groups. And we want to do right by them. I think at the end of the day, we would have loved to have had Brent yesterday. But we need to sometimes take a step back and say, what's best for the members of the association? And so that's why, look, we're building this thing for the long haul.
Oh,
we're not
yeah.
building it for tomorrow morning. So I'm excited about bringing him on when he gets here. And
so the chairman of the board for NIADA, Mr. Gordy Tormelin, piped in. Really excited. We love Gordy. Really looking forward to the Buy Here, Pay Here Forum in New Orleans this year. Great event, great location. So thanks for listening, Gordy.
And I don't want to breeze over the fact that you mentioned Ingram Walters in there about the forum. He's going to be part of this event, I understand.
Yeah, he is. He's actually going to close the event on Tuesday. And man, for anybody who's ever seen Ingram, you're in for a treat. And if you haven't seen Ingram, I will tell you it's worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
So knowledgeable about the buy here, pay here industry. Kind of grew up in the buy here, pay here industry. That ended up purchasing a franchise dealership. But just his insight. And Ingram would be the first to tell you. I can tell you a little bit what to do, but I can tell you a whole lot of what not to do. But his delivery and his ability to be able to relate to buy here, pay here dealers, I can assure you will get a nugget or two from Ingram at that closing reception. That really is worth the price of admission, just an opportunity. And Ingram hasn't been out speaking for
years.
For a number of years. So we couldn't be more excited. I'll tell you, we tried to get Ken and Ingram both, and unfortunately the scheduling didn't work out with Ken, but we look forward to having him join us in the near future. But we're very, very excited about it.
That's awesome.
Well, you mentioned his experience. I particularly enjoy his wit. He's just a funny kind of guy. Just you want to pay close attention when he's up there, because there's always going to be something surprising and some often funny.
He said one time we had a reception and he showed up a little bit late. And so Ingram came up, and of course he's always on the offensive, right? And so immediately came up and he was like, "Hey, Jeff," he goes, "I want to start real quick by telling you that my wife told me a long time ago, you can either have a wife with pretty hair or you can be on time." He goes, "Isn't my wife's hair pretty?" And I said, "Yes, sir. It's very pretty."
That's a good one. I'm going to borrow that.
He's going to borrow that. It's we anytime we are late to something, I think that Jim is going to
funny.
Some rendition.
Right.
It's a lot.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, anything else to share before we wrap up? I know we want to put another mention about the foundation and the work that's happening to support those dealers in Florida and the Southeast. They continue to recover, and a lot of them sustain damage. A lot of them will have in our buy your pair space, there'll be a lot of customers who sustain damage as well, and so there'll be a lot of people ripple effects on that.
That could use help.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Just echo all those things that you said. I'm working through the foundation board. I'll give a shout out real quick. The Colorado Independent Automobile Dealers Association made a $10,000 donation to the NIADA Foundation to help the other day. Can't say enough good things about all the positive work that David and the team out in Colorado do. They do a fantastic job and have a great association out there. And we've got a number of people who are making contributions.
That's wonderful.
On the forum, I will tell you that the early bird registration ends next Wednesday.
Okay.
I think that's the 16th. Yes. So and registration goes up $200 after that. Okay. So that's for members of the association. So $495. Make sure that you get out there, you get registered, and it also helps us because then we can put you in the appropriate roundtable so that you're talking with dealers that are similar in size. If you have a service department, we'll put you in a group that has a service department. But registration ends, and the hotel registration we'll end up selling out of that room block, but that ends on the 16th as well. So just make sure and get registered. You can go to the website and register for that today.
Before we let you go, Kathy posted on Facebook. Thank you, Jeff and team, for coordinating the NIADA Policy Conference and the Buy Here, Pay Here Conference. Great resources and connections for us to continue to build on. So,
yeah, Kathy's out of Pennsylvania. They did, or Mid-Atlantic, I guess they represent more than just Pennsylvania. Kathy, it was her first time to attend. She did a phenomenal job. They did a great job getting the message across to their legislators, and yeah, glad to have her there. She did a great job.
Outstanding.
Well, thank you so much for joining. It's always such a pleasure, Jeff. It really is to have you here. You're just lots of very articulate, lots of great information, and you're just a fun guy to talk to. So we really appreciate all your
You should
work.
catch me later in the evening. I'm a lot of fun then. I'm just kidding. Jim and Michelle, thank you for not only for having me, thank you for having NIADA, thank you for having us be a part of the morning show, and certainly thank you for what you're doing in the industry, helping to get the message out. And I get a chance to hear you guys quite often, and hear the when you have like a really good guest, not me, but when you have a really good guest, it always brings a lot of value to the industry, and we certainly appreciate you guys playing that role there. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And we're open to suggestions about things to talk about too. So we're going to say goodbye. And if you want to stay backstage for just a minute so we can say a proper goodbye after we've closed out the show, we'd love that.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay. Great conversation.
Yeah,
it always is whenever we've got Jeff here.
Well, it's good to get caught up because he's in there. And I'm going to be interested at the end of the year to find out whether Brent Carmichael or Jeff Martin has more airline points. That's what I want to find out when we get back to it.
We'll have to pose that to them, have them both on the show after Jeff or after Brent comes on. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday. It's Friday. Hope you guys have a great weekend. It's, there's still a lot of cleanup on the East Coast, and, it seems like the weather is improving and starting to cooperate a little bit for people to be able to do the things that they need to do. Right. So again, our hearts and our support goes out to all of those that were affected by the recent hurricanes. Sure. Have a great rest of your week. We will see you on Wednesday. Again, we don't do the Monday morning broadcast, so we'll have a great highway topic then. And so we'll just see you then. Thanks so much, everybody.